Welcome back, everybody. Friday, February 3rd. That is correct. I am John Aravosis. Welcome back to the Aravosis Report, my nightly show talking about the latest from Ukraine. Let me get TikTok going here on my iPad. You guys are on my laptop, just so you know. I'll be looking back and forth for that reason. Here's the play draw and guess with custom words now. I don't think so. TikTok keeps trying to entice me to do silly things, which I'm not going to do. All right. Introduce yourselves, folks. As always, say who you are, where you're from, if you would. Hello, TikTokers and YouTubers and Twitchers and Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn. That's it. Yes. I don't know if we're going to get everybody tonight. We've already got some Facebook, some Twitch, and lots of YouTube as usual. Oh, hey, Czech Republic. Hey, copies. Oh, hey, guys on YouTube, on TikTok. Hello, Lithuania. Oh, hey, guys. St. Martin. Oh, that's fun. I didn't realize. I wasn't noticing before that's where you were. Hey, Debbie from England. Hey, guys. Everybody give a quick little shout out where you're from while we wait for folks to join us. As always, I like to go a quick minute or two. Hey, Ashe from Maryland. Oh, some of these names, they're hard. Anyway, hey guys. So yeah, we've got a good amount of news tonight. I'll tell you in a second some of my plan for tonight and for tomorrow involving you all. So we'll go from there next. I'll start doing the introduction thing here. Actually, as always, mods, if when I'm sort of I'm going to sort of tell what's happening after the show and then for tomorrow morning. If you guys can, if you're there already, just remind folks what it is. So what we're going to do tonight after the show, so the show goes about an hour. After the show, we're going over to the Discord. We're going to hang out, and I'm going to talk about the Chinese balloon. I'm not going to do it on the show here just because it's not Ukraine. We try to keep this to Ukraine right now. Thank you, great CFI. But we will go over to my Discord, discord.aravosis.com, and we will talk about the balloon. So join us there, guys. It's easy to find. I'll just remind you all, you can find the Discord link in my profile, the Linktree link in my profile on TikTok. Click it. All my links are there. Same thing for you guys. You can just go to aravosis.com. It's that same link. The other thing is tomorrow morning on TikTok, 10 a.m. Eastern time on TikTok, I will be having a special live for only the TikTok subscribers, but this is the VIP subscribers, the folks who pay to support my work on TikTok. You've got the subscribe button hidden somewhere on the page. The mods or somebody can hopefully tell you. And you guys, I will have a hangout with you tomorrow at 10 a.m. Eastern time, a coffee talk, as I call it. So join us then. All right, let me get rolling. So the U.S. announced a $2.17 billion aid package today. It included, thankfully, exactly what we've been talking about, what we've been hoping, which are the GLSDB bombs, which is the ground launch small diameter bomb. These are the longer range missiles that we've been hoping the U.S. would provide. Now, these are not the long range missiles we were hoping the U.S. would provide. Those are the ATACMS. Those they haven't provided yet. Those are missiles. The ones we want the U.S. to provide are the missiles that can go around 200 miles or 300 kilometers. These missiles can go around 94 miles or so, or 150 kilometers, which is still great because it's about twice the distance of the current missiles we provide the Ukrainians. So this is a big deal. I've explained previous nights, but I'll tell you again because we do get different people showing up each night. A big part of the reason this matters is the Russians, although not always terribly smart, right? Because, but generally speaking, when the Russians are being smart, they have been putting their ammunition storage, their bunkers where they keep the troops, where the troops can sleep, and their command and control, basically their military headquarters, they're putting them smartly beyond the range of the Ukrainian HIMARS. So the Russians have had to move their ammunition and everything else back 60 plus miles. Thank you, Andrew, for that. Because they've had to get it out of the range of the HIMARS. Well, this weapon, instead of going 50 to 60 miles, right, which is the current one, this weapon can go almost 100 miles. Well, that doubles the distance, which now means the Ukrainians are going to be able to hit the current Russian military storage, the troops, the ammunition, and the command centers of the Russians. So this is a big deal. The Russians will have to move back even further. And I suspect some of the military folks on here could probably tell you guys that's a big PITA. you want to have your ammunition near the front. You want to have your ammunition near the fighting. You don't want to move your ammunitions, 100 miles away because by the way, thank you, Neil, for the whale there, the wave. When the further you move the ammunition away, the more trips you've got to do to get it back and forth. Because think about it. If Ukraine's new missiles from the US, these actually they're bombs that go on missiles, but we're going to give them both. So if the new missiles can go twice as far and the Russians have to move their ammunition twice as far in order for the ammunition to get to the front, here was where the Russian ammunition is currently, right? Boom, boom. In order for it to go from here, they've got to move it back now because the new missiles can hit it. To go here, they're going twice as far. That takes twice as long. That means half the ammunition is getting to the front in the same period of time. So you've got to double up the number of trips you're doing delivering ammunition. Trust me on the math here. Bottom line is, by giving the Ukrainians these missiles, we're making it a lot harder for the Russians to supply their own troops. And as we know, the Russians stink at supplying their troops. They're very bad at the logistics of providing weapons, of providing ammunition, of providing even food and water. This is only going to make it harder for them. So it's great. I didn't do a quick pitch, but I should do my quick pitch. Please do follow me and subscribe on TikTok and YouTube. And please do keep the gifts coming. I do this for free, and I've been doing it for free since the war broke out, broadcasting almost every night. Now I do Monday to Friday, 6 p.m. Eastern. But for the first several months, I was doing it 7 days a week when the war just began, doing it for free. You're in full time. Your guys' gifts pay my bills, so please keep them coming. I really appreciate it. The gifts on TikTok, I will do a shout out whenever I see them. The gifts on YouTube, YouTube questions that are the super chats, I will always get to those as the next question. And what else? Oh, since I sort of jumped right in here for questions, the way the show works, if anybody's new, first half of the show, I talk about the news. I give you guys the news that I think matters today from Ukraine. And then the second half of the show, I take your guys' questions. Well, to submit the questions, obviously you guys on TikTok, YouTube and everywhere else, you can just use the comment box at the bottom of your screen. On TikTok, the easiest way is to use the Q&A function that's in my profile on TikTok, because that way your question gets queued up and I can even get to it in half an hour and it's still there. So thank you for that. Thank you, Crowded Bath, for the heart there. Let's move on. Berlin, Germany. Good news from Germany. It seems like Germany's been doing some good things here. Thank you, Inspired Woman. Germany announced today that they have approved a German arms maker's plans to sell 88 older Leopard 1 tanks to Kyiv. Now, the German tanks that are currently going to be going to Ukraine from Germany, but also from a number of other countries, Poland, we think Norway, maybe Spain, et cetera, right? There's about maybe 12 countries or so. We don't know all of them yet. But those tanks are the Leopard 2s, the more modern tanks. The Germans have now approved selling the Leopard 1 tanks to Ukraine, 88 of them, which is not a small number. I mean, that's great. The Ukrainians were saying they need on the order of 300 to 500 tanks. Currently, NATO's plans are to get Ukraine, 120 tanks, something like that. So throwing in another 88 tanks would be huge. That would get you to 200 right there. The Leopard 1s were manufactured between the mid-1960s and the mid-1980s. They were the first battle tank built for West Germany's Bundeswehr, which is the West German military, back when it was West Germany versus East Germany, when I was young. Thank you, Diana, for the galaxy there. This is interesting, though, and I don't know the answer to this yet because this just came out today. Germany will be selling these to Ukraine, okay, for 100 million euros, which is around $100 million. I have no idea how Ukraine pays for this. There is a legitimate issue here as to how much debt Ukraine is going to be accruing here. They've got IMF debt, because they're the international financial institutions are helping pump money into the Ukrainian economy because the Russians are destroying the Ukrainian economy, and you got to keep an economy running. So I don't quite know how that works. My guess is if you're Ukrainian, you want the tanks. You worry about paying for it later. So they'll go into some kind of debt to the Germans. Oops. Hello, dog. What you doing? All right, sorry. Dog is whining at me from below here. All right, dog. Well, as you all know, my dog takes precedence. There we go. She was whining at me from below the table. She wanted to be covered up in her bed. So I apologize. My dog comes first. the one issue that was raised about this, I think this was in Sky News, I'm not sure. One issue that was raised about this is this is Politico. I'm sorry, this was from Politico today, is that you run into potential logistics issues for the Ukrainians because the Leopard ones, first of all, they're no longer produced. So, you've got to make sure that if you're going to give them the tanks, they've got spare parts, right, to be able to repair the tanks. Bigger problem is going to be the shells, the actual ammunition the tanks shoot. Their shells are a different caliber than the Leopard 2 tanks, which are the newer tanks, which means the Europeans, thank you, Sig Sauer, the Germans are going to have to get two different kinds of ammunition to the Ukrainians, ammunition for the Leopard 1, ammunition for the Leopard 2, and it means the Ukrainians themselves now, if the Ukrainians accept the deal, right? We don't know yet whether Ukraine wants to buy this. Thank you, Marcy. Is that the Ukrainians are now going to have two supply lines for two different kinds of artillery, for two different kinds of shells for each of its Leopard tanks. It just doubles up the complication for them. It's something to keep in mind. Make sure you follow and subscribe, as I've said. Please do. Israel. So interesting, positive, but I'm still a little surprised by this. Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel said yesterday he expressed a willingness to send, quote, military things to Ukraine. The Times of Israel reported. Now, I have no idea what that means. Thank you, L, for the heart there, and Lap 12. Thank you for that. Actually, thank you very much for that. I know that's a very particularly generous gift. Thank you. Israel has been a real PITA to pain in the ass on this sort of Ukraine thing from the beginning. They have not been, well, okay, let me put it this way. Israel claims they're worried about Russia in terms of keeping good relations with Russia because Russia controls what goes on in Syria, and Israel needs to be able to fly into Syria to be able to bomb some of the Iranian militias and all of that are in Syria attacking Israel, right? Thank you, killers, for the hat there. So Israel does not want to tick off Russia so that Russia impedes Israel's efforts to go after what Israel considers terrorists in Syria, right? Well, the rest of us have been a little annoyed because we pump a ton of money into Israel, and it would be nice if Israel actually did some of the things to help our foreign policy goals as well. So this is interesting. So Israel was refusing ammunition. Israel has been refusing to even provide defensive weapons to Ukraine. Israel has Iron Dome and then a laser version, but basically technology that is even better. I think it's even better than our Patriot missiles. Technology that's excellent at shooting down incoming missiles, because that is something that Israel faces quite often. Well, even that they've been refusing to give to Ukraine because they're afraid it's going to make the Russians mad. Thank you, Mundashi, for the corgi, the skateboard corgi. So this is interesting. I mean, frankly, any military things would be good news because Israel hasn't been giving any military things from what we know. Having said that, Netanyahu saying military things is a bit weird, but let's see what happens. Bloomberg is reporting that Germany and Sweden are moving ahead on giving surface-to-air missiles to Ukraine. They're in talks over a new arms package under which Stockholm would provide Ukraine with surface-to-air missiles and launchers for the German Iris-T air defense system. This is a system the Ukrainians have been saying they want, so that's good news. The new Czech president, who has been really taking the world by storm. This guy, he looks like a motorcycle biker. I mean, he's this like shocking white hair and beard, big supporter of Ukraine. He came out and said that the West should give Ukraine all types of weapons except nukes. Quote, when it comes to conventional weapons, I see no reason for any limits, he told France 24. France 24 reported, citing Agence France Presse, Ukraine cannot fight a tough opponent without armored technologies, unmanned aerial vehicles, and maybe supersonic aircraft. Now, again, it's not like the Czech Republic determines which weapons NATO is going to be sending, but, it helps to have more and more countries sort of pushing the limits in terms of pushing the rest of NATO to kind of move ahead on providing these things to Ukraine. So this is still a good thing. It's a very good thing. He's a former general too. Yeah, Copies is saying he's he does ride a motorcycle. There you go, because he looks it, and he's a former. He's saying chairman of NATO. Do you mean Secretary General of NATO? I know he's a former general as well. What else we got here? So that's a Czech president. I've also got a Patreon account. Do check out my Patreon. It's another way you can support my work. And as I always recommend, if you know other creators that have Patreons, look at that as well. Basically, Patreon is a website where you can go and make a monthly contribution to help people out. It's a really simple way of giving $5 a month, whatever it is. And on the creator side, it's nice to be able to see how much money is coming in each month, because at least you know that much is coming in next month. So check out my Patreon. It's patreon.com/Aravosis. Again, you guys on TikTok can find it just in my profile. The Linktree link will take you to all of my links, Discord, Patreon. Check it out. And for you guys, aravosis.com works for that as well. On the war front, Bakhmut not looking as good for the Ukrainians. Now, let me get out the handy-dandy map. So Bakhmut, the map of Ukraine. Bakhmut is over here, right to the east of Kramatorsk, right to the southwest of Severodonetsk, right? So you can see here in eastern Ukraine. This is the area where I would say the biggest fight, where the biggest fighting has been taking place of late. Okay. The issue here is that so the Russians have been fighting, trying to get Bakhmut for 6 months or so. They've not been having a lot of success. Finally, now, the Wagner group has been doing most of the fighting until now. This is the Russian mercenary group, the soldiers for hire, and they've been doing most of the fighting. They, in recent weeks, basically established a policy of just going like crazy. I mean, these guys have been doing wave after wave of just sending soldiers, former convicts, basically. They went to the prisons and they got prisoners to join their group with the promise that if they fight for 6 months or more, they will expunge their record and make them free. Well, free if they survive the war. Well, pretty much they're ensuring these guys will not survive the war, because what Wagner Group is doing is they are sending these soldiers at the Ukrainians in the open fields. Thank you, Neil, for that. In the open fields, they are not even protecting them with military vehicles, nothing. And these guys are getting shot. Shot dead. Thanks, Neil. I appreciate that. Multi hats. These guys are getting shot dead, not surprisingly. And of course, it's the convicts that are getting killed. Anyway, it's been a lot of deaths, and what was I going to say with this, with the Bakhmut? But it's been having some success. They have been able to get the suburb of Bakhmut called Soledar. They actually, Sky News had their expert Michael Clark look at this today to see kind of what was going on. Clark said that, in fact, I'll read you some of what he said. He thinks Bakhmut is close to the end, meaning the Ukrainians are about to lose it to the Russians. The Russians have got north and south of I love that. The Brits use different phrasing than the Americans. We say have gotten. That is archaic English that still exists in America. It goes back to older English that the Brits don't say anymore, but in America we still say it because in other words, the older English stuck here when we were a colony. So have got, I love that. We would say have gotten. So the Russians have gotten north and south of the city. The concern is, thank you, Addie, that the Russians are starting to encircle Bakhmut. And the danger comes here that if the Russians are able to completely encircle the city, they will then trap the Ukrainian troops inside. And obviously that's not a good thing. So at some point soon, the Ukrainians may have to decide whether they're just going to abandon the city. I will say this, Bakhmut just doesn't matter. All the security experts, all the defense experts will tell you that it has not been worth the deaths and the loss of equipment that the Russians have had attacking the city for 6 months. The Russians lost at least 5,000 men killed trying to go after this town, and they just will tell you it isn't worth it. So, the Ukrainians have been fighting back because the Ukrainians, well, I think a couple things. Maybe the Ukrainians know something about the town that they're not telling us, so maybe. Or at the same time, the Ukrainians have said they pretty much want to bleed the Russians dry. If the Russians want to attack this town, and it's difficult, remember, being a defender is always better, right? If I'm the defender and I'm defending a town and I'm hunkered down, thank you, Timothy, for the hat, and I'm hunkered down, it takes fewer troops for me to hunker down than it does for you to attack me. So if you're on the offense and you're coming at me, you need more troops, and you're probably more of your troops are going to die. So at this point, the Ukrainians have said, you know what? If Russia wants to throw everybody after this town, let's let them kill themselves and do it. That's been the Ukrainian theory. But now the danger is, if the Ukrainian troops are going to get surrounded, and once you're surrounded, right, they kill you, it's not worth it. So we may very well see the Ukrainians pull out of Bakhmut in the next week. Let's see. It's a possibility. Let me see. What else was I going to say? Oh, yes. Just the rest of it from Michael Clark, the military expert. The Ukrainians will have to decide. Thank you, Pam, for that. The Ukrainians will have to decide, can we stop the ring from closing? Can we stop the Russians from circling? Or do we arrive at the point when we have to get out and live to fight another day? Nope, Timothy. I'm looking at your SNN tag, Timothy. Sorry, Timothy Leary was worried his subscription tag is missing, but it literally says SNN Timothy Leary 590. So I don't know. I'm seeing it on my end. We have a super chat question from Cliff Wolf. Hey, Cliff. Please explain if, hang on a second here. I gotta get my glasses so I can read it better. Please explain, if Putin sends in 300 to 450,000 Russians in the next 10 days, how can the Ukrainian army defeat this assault? Well, that's a concern. The issue here, what Cliff is getting at, is the Ukrainians are worried, and we have seen experts in the West as well, some of the former British government officials, former Royal Air Force officials, generals, who are worried that the Russians are planning a big assault in the next 2 to 3 weeks. We had previously heard a couple months ago, maybe the beginning of January, that Putin had ordered the new head of the war, who's General Gerasimov. Remember, he got rid of the other guy and he put a new guy in. He's like the 4th or 5th time he's done this. Putin ordered the new guy, we heard, to take eastern Ukraine, the Donbass, which is Luhansk and Donetsk, by March. Okay. And we had heard this as a rumor at the beginning of January. The Donbass, the eastern region, which Putin really wants, is basically, more or less, okay, I'm doing this roughly, but more or less this area. Now, this is Luhansk, this is Donetsk, 2 different states in the east of Ukraine. Donetsk, Russia controls about 50%. Luhansk, Russia controls about, 95, 98%. Okay. So what Russia really wants is the rest of Donetsk. The problem is it ain't easy. And they really want it. The thinking is that very well could be a big attack that Putin is planning for 2 to 3 weeks from now. The reason, a couple different reasons here of why Putin ordered this. He needs a victory. Okay. He needs a victory. They have not been doing well. They're going to be able to possibly point to Bakhmut soon. Frankly, better winning Bakhmut than losing Bakhmut, even though Bakhmut doesn't really matter from the Russian perspective. At least they can point to it and say, hey, folks back home, thank you, Phoenix, for the galaxy. Hey, folks back home, at least we got a city that doesn't matter, right? The bigger issue comes, I think, that all of these tanks that NATO is promising, right? The Germans, the Americans, the British, and then the other countries like Poland, who are going to provide the German tanks to Ukraine that they've got. These, thank you, Cynthia, for the whale. Give a quick wave for Cynthia. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. Hang on a sec. So I love the whale. You threw me with the whale there. Thank you. You threw me for a loop. With all the tanks coming. So the problem is the Ukrainians have got to get trained on using these tanks. They've also got to get trained on combined arms warfare. Basically, how they should use the tanks with other vehicles, with aircraft, with drones, like infantry, how all their forces should work together. That's additional training. It is not clear how many of these tanks will arrive by the spring. Nonetheless, Putin is worried that the tanks are going to arrive in March, end of March. That's at least the concern at best case scenario. And I think he ordered his troops to have a big success before the tanks arrive. So one of the questions is this offensive in 2 to 3 weeks, if there is one, is it going to be the big one, or is it a smaller one, as a precursor to a big one that might happen in April? I think if the Russians are smart, first of all, the Russians were smart. They would wait until April till they really get their act together. But if they're at least half smart, they would do something at the end of the month to try to get a little bit of success, and then still wait to get all their troops organized. So I don't know that anybody thinks the Russians can pull together 300 to 400,000 men like in the next 2 to 3 weeks. Whether they're able to do it by springtime, who knows? Keep in mind, the Russians supposedly, thank you, David, or Dave Edge, the Russians supposedly had mobilized 300,000 men. We don't really know how many they mobilized. We don't know whether they had, in other words, drafted, whether they had drafted only 200,000 men or what the real number was last September, okay? But a lot of folks I'm seeing are saying it was 300,000, but Putin only used 150, that he's still got another 150, maybe even 200,000 left. And he's been taking the time to do real training with them so that rather than them getting the 1 or 2 days training that's a lot of these troops got, that was a total joke, he's now had since September, end of September, right? October, November, December, January, we're into February, 4.5 months so far, maybe, of training for these guys. That's a hell of a lot better than 3 days training. So the question is, by springtime, by the end of March, early April, will the Russians have enough troops that they could throw, even if it's not 300 to 450,000, like Cliff is asking, a couple 100,000 troops, and just throw them like cannon fodder the same way they've been doing with the Wagner group, right? Because what the Wagner has been doing, as I told you, they have been in Bakhmut successfully throwing so many men at the Ukrainians and not minding that all the Russians are getting killed, because basically you throw so many men, some of them are going to survive, right? It's the concept of, like, the terrorist on the airplane, right? Everyone's afraid of getting killed to stop the terrorist, but I guess if all 300 passengers run at the terrorist, somebody's going to survive, right? And the terrorist will die. But nobody wants to be the 20-50% of the passengers who get killed trying it. Well, in Russia's case, they're ordering these guys to do it, and they don't have a choice because it's the Russian military, or Wagner even worse. So that's what's going on. I don't know. I would hope, and I'm not sure what the answer would be here, whether it's machine guns or what. I would hope that NATO has been helping, and I think we must be helping the Ukrainians figure out, okay, if Russia does this, if they throw just massive numbers of men just running at you in a human wave, right? There you go. Sam is saying human wave. What is the best way to stop that? I mean, is it, I don't know, right? Is it, for example, it could be artillery. One of the things I sort of learned with the war here, because again, I'm a foreign policy guy much more than a military guy. My background is foreign policy. But with artillery shells, you can adjust the artillery shell to go off, on the ground, meaning it hits the ground and blows up. You can set it to go off in the air. And one of the reasons you do that is if you're actually trying to kill troops. It goes off in the air and it blows up and it spreads over a much larger area. So I don't know what my guess is. Okay, you got the thermobaric, although I don't know with thermobaric whether Ukrainians even have anything like that, right? We know that the Russians do. Folks are saying claymore mines, I was going to say flamethrowers potentially, machine guns. Anyway, my guess is we are probably, minefields. That's a good point. Thank you. I'm a who is it? I'm a paradox. I'm a paradox. That's cute. But my guess is, not even my guess, I guarantee you NATO is helping the Ukrainians figure out what they need in order to stop this. And let's hope it works. The other thing is, maybe Russia pulls this off in terms of getting a ton of men, but Russian logistics are terrible. Keep in mind, and when we say logistics, we mean food and water, ammunition, fuel for your vehicles. Logistics is, I always compare it to going on a trip for you or me, and you're driving cross country. And to prepare for the trip, you go, okay, we've got to get the car, right? Are we renting a car? Are we using our car? If we've got a car, we need fuel. So we'll have to stop along the way at a certain, we got to keep an eye on the odometer, right? Or, the odometer or whatever it is to see the fuel tank, to see how much fuel we need when. We know we're going to have to stop to go to the bathroom every 2 hours. So we need to find bathrooms along the way, right? You've got all of these. And at night, we've got to sleep somewhere. Where are we going to sleep? In the military, it's not that different in a way. When you're planning with this many troops, you've got to think, how am I feeding them? Imagine 300,000 troops. At the end of the day, those 300,000 troops have to eat and drink water, especially. Where are they getting it from? Where are they sleeping? What are they sleeping in? Right? The next few weeks are still going to be freezing in Ukraine. Hold on, let's ask here. What is the temperature in Donetsk, Ukraine? 28 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 28 degrees Fahrenheit is just below freezing. So for you guys in Celsius, I'm going to go with -2, I think, right? You're sleeping outside in this weather. Where are you sleeping? What are you sleeping in? The Russians have not had sleeping bags. Remember this? For the recruits in September, they didn't even have sleeping bags for them. They didn't have winter boots for them. Where are they getting it from, right? And actually, yeah, Darren Scott is saying that would be 900,000 meals a day because you're giving them 3 meals a day. Where are they? Okay, thank you. It is -2C. Where are you getting it from, right? Their vehicles need fuel. I mean, because at some point they've got to use vehicles for something. Where's the fuel coming from? Where's the ammunition coming from for their guns? I mean, they've got ammunition for their guns and their tanks or whatever, but at some point you need to fill it up again. Anyway, this is what the Russians are terrible at. And the hope is that, and from a lot of the military guys that I, former generals that I read and follow, they've been saying just that. They say, maybe the Russians can get these men together, but keep in mind, the Russians aren't great at logistics of all of this, right? Frostbite as well. So let's hope. Let's hope that if the Russians are able to pull this off, I think it's going to be very interesting. I will never try to write off the Russians, right? We should never assume the Russians aren't going to be able to pull something off, but they've done so badly that I certainly won't write off the Ukrainians either. OM Ginger, hello, Ginger. What do you believe NATO's response will be if we see that the Russian offensive is successful? I think NATO's going to give more weapons. Well, there's two possibilities, right? First of all, it depends what the Russian offensive is and what is successful, right? Meaning, is the Russian offensive, thank you, PJ, is the Russian offensive trying to get all of Donetsk in the east, right? Maybe that's it, all of the province, so that they control both of the provinces of the east 100%. There is a possibility. There's two things that you'll see, I think. One, I think you will see the NATO give more and better weapons more quickly to Ukraine. Thank you, Bonnie. Because keep in mind the concern here. The concern here isn't just about helping Ukraine. It is, but I think the altruism of helping Ukraine only goes so far. NATO is helping Ukraine because NATO believes it is in our strategic national interest to support Ukraine. And I support that. I think absolutely you don't just do things as a country. You don't just do things around the world because it's the right thing to do. That sounds nice, but in a democracy, you've got to defend that to your voters. You've got to, America now, you've got to defend. Why are you spending these billions of dollars on this war all the way across the world unless you can justify it in your national interest? I think we can. I've said that I think Biden needs to do a better job of explaining why it's in our national interest, but I think you can. So I think you're going to, so two things. I think you're going to see NATO give more weapons if Ukraine loses this offensive. What I worry about is you're also going to see voices increase that say, hey, maybe Ukraine can't win this after all. Maybe it's a done deal that they're going to lose, and maybe we need to figure out how to resolve this conflict, right? So maybe they put more pressure on Ukraine to accept losing its territory, losing the territory it's already lost. I don't know. I would not support that. But I think you're going to see two things happen at once. Increased concern. Oh, I know what I was going to say. The reason I was telling you about all of this issue with Russia and everything else, there is a legitimate concern in the West. The reason we are helping Ukraine is because we are concerned that if Russia wins this war, Russia will be emboldened to attack other neighbors on its borders, potentially including Poland, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, NATO countries. And if Russia does that, we are at war with Russia. And there is a concern that basically, not even a concern, the thinking in large part is we help Ukraine in their war today to avoid a war tomorrow that we are a party to. And again, you don't see enough people on our side even explaining that. We let the MAGA crowd, and it is the MAGA crowd. Republicans overall have been very supportive. The MAGA Republicans are terrible on the war thing because Donald Trump and because of Fox News, and Fox News because of Donald Trump. Very pro-Russia, very pro-Putin, and very anti-Ukraine. And I'll say this too. I think, unfortunately, and we're dealing with Donald Trump here. Trump set the tone on the whole thing. I mean, Trump already was pro-Putin. Trump was already anti-Ukraine. But because Joe Biden is now president, and Joe Biden is the one that is obviously running the war, so to speak, Trump per se has to be against it because Trump just, Biden beat Trump. He takes this, he makes things personal and partisan when they don't need to be. And Trump's followers will, of course, listen to Trump and go, well, Donald says Ukraine bad, therefore Ukraine bad. And I mean, I get that, but it's a really dangerous way to deal with foreign policy. So in any case, let me move on. I'm spending a lot of time on that, but let me see here. All right, let me keep going here. Wagner update. So this was just a really quick little update on this, but the British Ministry of Defense said today that it appears that the Wagner Group, which is the mercenary group that's been fighting in the East, has been recruiting fewer soldiers from the ranks of Russian prisoners. Thank you, Flower Lady, again for the magic mirror. Thank you for that. Has been recruiting fewer prisoners for the war than they were before. And there's reports in the past 10 days that the Russians have been relying less on Wagner's human wave assault. In other words, the tactic I was telling you where the Wagner Group was just throwing Russian troops, former prisoners, at the front of the Ukrainians and just letting them get slaughtered, right? That's slowed down significantly in the last 10 days. The thinking is that this could be the combination, A, because the Wagner Group has fewer prisoners now that they've been able to use, but B, the reason they have fewer prisoners is because of this very public fight that broke out between the Wagner Group and its head, Prigozhin, this oligarch, this billionaire, and the Ministry of Defense in Russia. They've both been fighting each other for basically, who's got the biggest chest, shall we say, right? Who's the strongest military member? Who's the one who can save Russia, blah, blah, blah. And they're not working together very cooperatively. And it looks like potentially the British Ministry of Defense is saying that basically the Russian establishment in the military is fighting back, and they're cutting off the Wagner Group. So they're cutting them off from getting prisoners. They're cutting them off from their involvement in Bakhmut, right? Thank you, Bonnie, for that. And that this could be a sign of that. Now, the final point that the British Ministry of Defense made, which is a point I'd made before too, it's not very healthy for a military to have two different factions of soldiers, one the mercenaries and one the thank you, Jake, for that. To have one the mercenaries and one the regular Russian soldiers, with the Ministry of Defense publicly hating each other, publicly trying to get credit, right? Some of them are trying to get credit from each other. I mean, they keep claiming that one is basically. I mean, how do I put this? The Ministry of Defense says, "Oh, we liberated Soledar," but the Wagner Group, the mercenaries, turn around and go, "We liberated Soledar," and each one isn't giving the other credit, and they were doing it very publicly and very bitchy. It's been crazy. Oh, I see the trolls are. The Russians are getting upset, folks. Now, I will say this. Thank you, by the way, TikTokers. I see we've got a good crowd on TikTok, a pretty good number of folks today. That's got to be part of the concern the trolls have. The Russian trolls have been very upset with us the last couple of weeks. They're getting worse. See, now this is interesting to me too. When Russia is revving up the trolls like they've been doing, at least I try to reverse engineer it and kind of say, okay, what are they doing, right? If Russia's sending more people to kind of freak out online, especially on TikTok, where they usually go, they're worried about something. What is it, right? I don't know. I don't know what it is, but thank you, Nathan and Paul WC. What else we got? I've got a store as well, by the way, just to tell you guys. I do have a store set up at store.aravosis.com. It's another link you can find in my profile on TikTok, just that main link. You'll see it there. Thank you, Killers, for the hat. And the rest of you on aravosis.com. But it's a cool t-shirt store we set up where they're all Ukrainian themed. And again, half the proceeds from the store up until now, I have been channeling back into aid to Ukraine. So every purchase you make goes to help the Ukrainians. The rest of it goes and helps me because I'm doing this for free and I'm doing it full time. So it helps me keep the show going. So please do help out if you can. Store.aravosis.com. All right, I'm looking at this. I'm going to skip the rest of this right now. Let's go and deal with the questions. I mean, the rest of the news were sort of little tidbits. I can mention them in the recap. All right. So TikTok, remember, you guys can submit questions or just your, oh, okay. He's leaving us. Hello. Yeah, that guy's leaving. The TikTok, you can submit questions via the Q&A link in my profile. Thank you, Sisso. Actually, I don't think I've seen that one before. That is cool. Thank you for that. And the rest of you can use the comment box, obviously, at the bottom. Let me pull up. Oh, sorry. There's Ben with one. Actually, let me make sure there was nobody before. I don't think there. No, I got Ginger and everybody. Good. All right, Ben. There we go. Do you think an emboldened Russia would still attack NATO despite NATO having superior firepower and nuclear weapons, or do you think they would take Georgia, Moldova? I think clearly, not clearly. I think what people are worried about initially is Georgia and Moldova, right? That's the, I mean, Georgia, maybe less of a concern in a way. Arif, hey, Arifa, thank you for that. And I don't mean a concern. I mean, we wouldn't be happy with it, but Moldova gets more dangerous because Moldova starts to get you, really close to the European Union, to the rest of Europe, right? That starts to become a bigger issue. The thing is, the nuke thing is interesting, right? I agree with you to some degree. What I mean is, I think what's underlying your question is, if I think that generally speaking, I mean, I think there's a contradiction going on here and I haven't quite figured it out in my own head. Generally speaking, I don't think Putin's got the balls to attack NATO because he knows that we all go to war and he can't even fight Ukraine. I mean, not effectively. Who knows what happens over the next year? Thank you, Bonnie. But he's not doing well against Ukraine. There's no way he wants to throw America and 29 other, possibly including Sweden and Finland, into the mix, fighting him because he's going to lose, right? So I don't see him attacking NATO in that regard. What worries me is, the lesson taken from the war and looking at it and going, well, for example, maybe he doesn't invade Poland. Are there border disputes that maybe he starts to play games with? You know what I mean? Are there border disputes with Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia? Where, I mean, yeah, we'd go to war if he invaded Latvia. Would we go to war if he took a mile of Latvia? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. Would we go to war if he starts fomenting trouble inside Latvia and Lithuania and Estonia? If he tries to do the same BS he did in Ukraine, right? We've got lots of Russian nationals in those countries and they're being oppressed. And he starts to foment a, civil war. Haha, it's not a civil war in Ukraine, but they call it a civil war. I mean, the Russians do. It's really an insurrection and a terrorist attack really funded by the Russians. But if they do the same thing in the Eastern European countries. So I don't know. I think there is a contradiction there as to, we don't think Putin's going to attack now, but we worry that Putin might be emboldened to attack later, in terms of finally taking NATO on and taking those countries on. Actually, you know what? Let me throw this at you. Donald Trump again. I think if Donald Trump were president, I do not think I could at all promise anybody in Europe that we would come to their defense if they got invaded by Russia. I'm not sure we would. I really don't. Right now, absolutely. We will go to war if they invade a NATO country. If Trump is president, I don't know. What I mean is, not only do I not know, there is no way I would tell you definitively that, yeah, we would go to war. No, I don't think Trump would want to. Trump would say, why? It's not, I mean, Trump would use the arguments his movement's using. It's not our war. Why do I care? I like Putin. We should have good relations with Putin. We should have good relations with Russia. Ukraine, who cares about Ukraine? They're bad. They're corrupt. They wouldn't help me win the presidency. So that, if that happens, then you do have a situation where the Russians could invade, let's not even think about that. All right, let me look TikTok questions here in the TikTok. Hang on, guys. TikTok Q&A. So World War III will likely not happen. I'm not really convinced that World War III is on the horizon anywhere. There's a really neat, I retweeted it today. So if you follow me on Twitter, my Twitter handle is @Aravosis. It's the same handle I use on TikTok and other places. I retweeted a former Russian foreign minister under Boris Yeltsin in the 1990s. This guy, I'm pretty sure, defected to the West, so to speak. I mean, defected, whatever you want to call it. Bill, I'm not sure what that means. I don't know what that means. And he did a nice Twitter thread today, like a short essay, explaining, as a former KGB officer himself, and Putin was as well, what Putin is thinking. And bottom line, he said, Putin, ever since the Cuban Missile Crisis, at the Cuban Missile Crisis, the Russians still thought, they could win a nuclear war. After the Cuban Missile Crisis, they gave it up, right? The Russians realized there's no way, nobody wins a nuclear war. He said, Putin still understands that. Putin does not want a nuclear war with the West. Putin knows he can't win a nuclear war. Thank you, Bill. Appreciate that. Putin cannot win a nuclear war. But what he does, thank you, Lynn, for that. But what Putin needs to do is convince the West that he's willing to have a nuclear war and keep threatening nukes, because that is what will scare the West. And this former KGB officer, former foreign minister of Russia, says that he thinks it's not a coincidence that Putin made the nuclear threats in the last day or two. He made some very explicit nuclear threats. And at the same time, Biden came out and said, we will not be giving F-16s to Ukraine. He thinks those were timed on purpose, that basically Putin scared Biden again about the nuclear stuff, and Biden felt he better come public and make it really clear, that we're not looking at giving planes to Ukraine. So that's the nuclear war thing, is they know they can't win a nuclear war. They know we can't win a nuclear war, but they also know that we think they're a little crazy. So we worry and go, oh my God, what might he do? I don't think he's crazy. I don't think Putin's crazy at all. I think he's very good at what he does, which is why I don't think we're going to have a nuclear war. But he's convinced us, he talks about nukes a lot. Who knows? It's a bluff. And also Putin's not stupid about this either. One of the arguments folks will give is, and I've seen this in foreign policy essays. Well, if there's only a 1% chance of nuclear war, that's a 1% chance of the entire planet dying. Don't we have to consider that important? 1% times 7 billion is still 700 million, or not 700 million, 70 million, whatever. Right? And at first it sounds kind of a reasonable argument, because you go, well, that's true. If it's only 1%, but 1% of literally the planet exploding, we should worry about that. Anyway. I ain't worrying about it. I think it should give us pause if we pay attention to it, but he's lying. Is it confirmed that China is helping Russia with equipment? I have not seen that confirmed. What I did see, let me rephrase that. There was something about a week ago with the U.S. telling China that we were concerned, thank you, Lorna, that Chinese companies were basically coming this close to violating the sanctions, and we thought the Chinese government might not be aware of it. I saw that. What I did not see is what we thought they were almost violating the sanctions with, like what they were actually doing. But we've not said anything beyond that, I think, about China. That's an interesting question. Smitten is asking on Be Smitten on TikTok, do you think China may take advantage of a weakened Russia to gain land? I mean, they should. This is something this is one of the dangers Russia faces, is clearly, even if Russia were to gain land in this war, people don't fear Russia anymore. The West doesn't fear. Well, the West fears Russia because they think they're crazy, right? We think they're nuts, and I don't, but we think they're nuts and they're going to use their nuclear weapons, whatever. But the Russian military is no longer feared like it was before. That means Russian weapons as well. We think of the Russian weapons as being kind of a joke now too, right? They're new weapon systems. We go, who cares? That means that countries on the border, or countries around the world, or even the West, typically might be more emboldened to take Russia on. Now, I mean, having said that, we're not, right? I mean, if anything, you'd think the West might even be more emboldened to take Russia on, because we've seen how lousy their military is and how lousy their weapons are. The opposite has happened. For the first time, or I would say not the first time, but certainly more than usual, we're sitting there genuflecting and bending over backwards and going, oh my God, Russia, don't get angry at us. Whereas when we were helping Afghanistan in the 1980s, We didn't sit there and go, oh, let's not help Afghanistan too much. What if Russia loses? We were sitting there going, Russia, lose, right? That was our goal in Afghanistan. Now, even though Russia has not been doing well and Russia's military is way worse than we thought and their weapons are way worse than we thought, we're somehow more afraid of Russia than we've ever been. There's a dissonance there. You know what I mean? It doesn't quite go. But I do think other countries, China looking at it, potentially is saying, you know what? If thank you, Benji, for the galaxy. If you're China and you're coveting some of Russia's resources in the East, minerals or natural gas or oil or whatever, it's interesting. I mean, again, Russia has nukes, you have nukes. What Russia might just use those nukes if it's a matter of losing a chunk of Russia. They might. Or Russia's in the same situation we're in, where Russia goes, well, we have nukes, but China does too. Thank you, Grayson, for that. And if Russia uses its nukes, China uses its nukes. So Russia says, well, if China invades, what do I really do? China could invade Eastern Russia, but, thank you, Kanowski, for that. That hot dog thing always cracks me up. And thank you, Lake Lady, for Friday. Anyway, yeah, I don't think China's going to do it, because I think China doesn't want the trouble, but, what else we got here, guys? Yeah, okay. I mean, Rob Wall was saying the same thing. I saw a comment that if Russia moves too many weapons and professional troops from other areas to Ukraine, which they did, this could open the door for China to make a land grab. I was saying from the beginning, thank you, Usik the cat. I'm not even sure how to pronounce that. Thank you for that. I was saying from the beginning that when Russia was moving all of its troops to Ukraine, thank you, Diane, even before they invaded, that Russia was taking a lot of troops from all over Russia and moving them to the west, right? I mean, we're talking Russia. Thank you, Kanowski. I don't think I've seen the following one before. Thank you for that. We're talking Russia's 11 time zones. I mean, it's huge. It's a huge country. They were taking troops from the Far East and moving them west to Ukraine. I was saying that we ought to move more American troops to the west. We should have moved more American troops to Alaska. We should have moved to Guam, Hawaii. We should have moved a lot more of our fleet to the Pacific. We should have, this is high stakes, but we should have potentially convinced the Russians, oh my God, the Americans are going to make a grab, or at least the Americans are considering making a grab for the East because they know we're preoccupied in the West. I wish to God we had done that. Now, mind you, the Chinese might not have been too thrilled with it, with an American military buildup. But my thinking is, thank you, El, my thinking is not to do it so much as to freak out the Chinese, but do it just enough that the Russians don't have a choice but to leave more troops in the East, right, in the Pacific, and they won't be able to help their war in Ukraine nearly as much. Actually, we still could do it. But you got to be careful because you don't want to inflame tensions. But honestly, I would have said, no, these are just troop exercises. You're scaring us. You're being very belligerent. You're scaring us. So just to be safe, we're going to move troops to Alaska and Guam and move our boats into the Pacific just because you're scaring us. But we're not going to do anything, Russia. Don't worry. Right? Whatever. What do I know? Let me find another TikTok question. Could a NATO country like Ukraine or Poland enter the war on their own to provide naval support or cruise missiles? Would that be bad? They could. They absolutely could. Now, I think the thing that is potentially bad is you want to hold together the coalition, right? The NATO coalition. You don't want it to fall apart. You don't want, let's say you said the UK. You don't want the UK giving, cruise missiles or whatever they've got, and the other coalition partners going, what are you doing? That's crazy. We're pulling out, and we're not helping anymore. I don't know what, right? So all of a sudden the Germans no longer say they're going to let their tanks go there or something else, right? So from the beginning, and I think Biden's done a good job, all the leaders have done a pretty good job, even with this recent blow up with Germany and the tanks. They've done a very good job, all the leaders, of kind of papering it over, and now we're all happy again because it's important to hold everybody together. So I think that's why you don't want the countries doing it, even though it's tempting, right, for us to look at it and go, well, having said that, the Brits kind of did. or the Brits got permission, right? Because Britain, a week or two before everybody else, said, we're sending tanks anyway, right? The French, a day before the Germans and the Americans announced they were going to send infantry fighting vehicles, the French announced they were going to send their own. And it sounds like the French just did it to kind of go, because the Americans and the Germans were dragging their feet. So there is that kind of an element, it seems, where you get, where sometimes the NATO countries speak up and are a little in your face about it with the other NATO countries, but not entirely. Yeah, Callum, we just do ya. Okay, Callum. What else we got here? We're all right. Suspense bought a super chat question asking about the Chinese balloon. Okay, I will talk for a moment about the Chinese balloon, but we are going to talk about it in the Discord afterwards. Discord.aravosis.com. We'll head out there after this and talk about the Chinese balloon. I'm kind of fascinated by it. I'm seeing two schools of thought. General Clapper, who was our top intelligence official under Obama and then Trump until Trump flipped out, he said today, there's nothing the Chinese can get from this balloon that they can't get from their spy satellites. He goes, I don't really care. He goes, I'm willing to take them at their word that the balloon is just a weather balloon. And in the end, he goes, is it really worth canceling a summit, or at least not a summit, but our Secretary of State going over there? He goes, no. So he didn't feel. Then you've got a number of the experts this afternoon. I think it's Bill Baer or something is his name. He's the former CIA guy, or former top CIA guy, or one of the top. I mean, not the top. You've got General Wesley Clark and some others saying, shoot the damn thing down right now, that the Russians are testing us. So thank you, Zoe. I'm very divided on it. I mean, I'll talk about it more in the Discord, but I'm intrigued and divided as to what's going on. I will say this finally. A lot of the Russian presidential candidates are now weighing in, and they've made it, I'm not blaming them, but they've made it political for Biden because they've criticized Biden. So now Biden's in a position where all the Republicans are criticizing him. So now what does he do? And it's affecting the presidential election. What does he do? All right. That's my answer on the plane. All right. Let me see here. All right. Let me look one more question on here, and then I'm going to do. Fareed says the meeting should not be canceled. That's the kind of thing I would think he would say. Yeah. I mean, he strikes me as a little more of a, I don't know what you want to call it, but yeah. I mean, he can be kind of hawkish, but he can also be kind of reasoned that way. Let me see real quick here. Ukraine doesn't. Okay, last question. What kind of a navy does Ukraine have? Ukraine doesn't really have a navy. They had one really big boat that they sank, so the Russians wouldn't get it, as I recall. They didn't have much else. They still do have a navy, which is ironic because they don't really have boats. And they've been really good at blowing up some of the Russian ships, as we know, right? Like the Moskva, that Russian flagship that they sank at the beginning of the war, right in the Black Sea there. But they don't really have much of a navy to speak of. No, they don't. Okay, I'm going to do the recap really quick of the stories we covered, and then we are going over to the Discord to talk about the balloon. And then remember, tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. Eastern Time, U.S. Actually, I'm going to set my timer right here. Hold on. Set an alarm for 9:45 a.m. There we go. That way I sit there and I go, why is my alarm on? But at 9:45 a.m., 10 a.m. tomorrow, thank you, Happy Beach family, I am going to be going live with you guys on TikTok with the paid subscribers on TikTok, who are a wonderfully generous subset, and only for you guys as my thank you to you. I'm trying to do it once a week or so, and we just hang out. We talk about it. We can talk about the balloon. We can talk about whatever. So join me there, 10 a.m. Eastern Time. Okay, U.S. All right, real quick. The U.S. has announced a new $2 billion military aid package, including ground-launched small diameter bombs, which, when paired with a missile, can go from a HIMARS and be shot over 94 miles, which is almost double the distance of the current missiles we are giving them. It is a good thing. Germany has approved the German arms maker's plans to sell 88 older Leopard 1 tanks to Kyiv. Israel, Prime Minister Netanyahu reportedly has said that he is willing to send military things to Ukraine, whatever that would be, but that would be a change, which is welcome. Bloomberg says Germany and Sweden are in talks on giving surface-to-air missiles to Ukraine, surface-to-air missile, the Iris-T, that Ukraine has been asking for. The Czech president, the new Czech president, has said the West should basically give Ukraine all types of weapons except nuclear weapons. On the war front, there is growing concern that the Russians may be getting close to surrounding Bakhmut in eastern Ukraine, and the Ukrainians may end up having to pull out. Wagner Group seems to be recruiting fewer soldiers from prisons, and it looks like they may be being cut out of the war a little bit because of the fight they were having with the Ministry of Defense, the Russian Ministry of Defense. I didn't mention a few other stories. I'll tell you really quick. Some new oil price caps have been agreed to by the European Union. Thank you. Who is that? Samo or Samso, I'm going to guess, or S4, but Samso maybe for the hat there. Sky News announces that European countries have agreed on a European Commission proposal to set price caps on Russian refined oil products to hopefully rein in some of the money Russia is making from oil. They did this before on some other oil products. These are some additional ones. Lithuanians, this is a nice story. Lithuanians donated 1 million euros in an hour. Thank you, Untangle. 1 million euros, which is $1 million in an hour to buy radars for Ukraine. I mean, imagine that. Mind you, Lithuania, I'm going to go 9 million people. Hold on. What's the population of Lithuania? No, oh my God, 2.7 million, 2.8 million. Oh my God, even smaller. 3 million people. 3 million people, folks, ponied up $1 million, 1 million euros in 1 hour. That's amazing. That's amazing. Good for them. And then finally, a car owned by a collaborator. Remember, collaborators are basically Ukrainians who are traitors who end up working for the Russian Occupation Authority. A car owned by a collaborator exploded in the Russian-occupied city of Enerhodar. Enerhodar, I'm pretty sure, is the city the Zaporizhia nuclear plant is in, or it's very close in Zaporizhia, and he was reportedly killed. I raised that story because the Ukrainians have been very good. I've been telling you for months now, the Ukrainians have been very good about, or very effective, I should say, at killing traitors, collaborators, because they're basically trying to send a message to anybody who would help the Russians. You know, if you help the Russians, you're next. All right, guys, I'm going to say good night. I will see you back Monday evening, 6 p.m. Eastern Time, U.S. Thanks for joining us today. I will still do some TikTok updates probably over the weekend. I may do a couple updates. So check my TikTok account. Do follow me there and on YouTube. What else? Otherwise, tomorrow morning, as I said, 10 a.m. Eastern Time, I will be having a special get-together, a coffee talk just for the TikTok folks. And otherwise, we are going to Discord right now, discord.aravosis.com. You can also find the link in my profile on TikTok. You can find the link via aravosis.com. And we'll talk about the Chinese balloon for a little bit. Okay? So let's go over there right now, guys. Thank you, mods. Thank you, everybody. You've all been incredibly generous tonight. I very much appreciate it. Don't freeze to death. It's been, I will say this, DC is getting cold tonight, but at least DC isn't getting as cold tonight. Like DC, it might get down where I am to 14 degrees Fahrenheit, which is cold. Hold on. What is 14 degrees Fahrenheit in Celsius? -10, which is very cold, but that's about as cold as DC gets. And it gets that way usually once a winter, and it's overnight. And then tomorrow morning, during the day, it'll get back to around freezing again. So we're pretty lucky here. The rest of the country is getting really socked, but it's not too bad here at least. So yeah, I was going to say New Jersey and the rest of you guys further north, it's going to be gross. Yeah, Canada, forget it. But at least in DC, it's not bad. So I say not bad. I mean, typically this is one night is bad. Oh, my sister's calling. I'm still on, Kath. All right. Let me talk to you guys later. Hang up and talk to the sister here, and I'll see you.